Hey Marcus, welcome. It's nice to speak with you today.
Good to be here.
So, I would love to hear a little bit about your role at Junction. Just give me a broad overview of like kind of what you're working on and the different domains of that you're kind of touching with your role.
Yeah, absolutely. I am vice president of delivery, and so that's a unique role here and a little different than, maybe other software companies. I am in charge of client success, so people using our application and getting value out of it when it's implemented. I'm responsible for client onboarding, making sure that our application is a good fit for that organization and they understand how to get the most out of it. So there's a lot of training and oversight into their implementation of our workflows and system. Then I'm also in the product and technical side as what we're doing to serve our clients is on the cutting edge. So there is a lot of rapid development. The product is always evolving. So making sure that it evolves in a way that best serves and generates value for our clients is also a part of my job.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I'm really excited to dive into some of those points here today. One of the things that I'd love to double click on is kind of as we were discussing before this call, what is the difference between like, all right, so AI agents, AI agent architecture, automations, these things are becoming really popular in the marketplace. And kind of what we were touching on is like some of these use cases are still developing and like there's sort of this sense that AI agents can just do everything with very little oversight, which is like not the reality of where we're
Mhm.
at. And so it seems like you're focusing on is trying to add as much real value, as much real ROI as you can to your guys' clients. And so I'd love to hear kind of like what are the use cases you guys are going into and like what does the actual like ROI and implementation look like to take an AI agent and, add value to a business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if, in broadly speaking, some things that you'll probably hear later in me saying or talking with you is transparency, control, and purpose, right? Like it's very purposeful in how our agents do what they do, right? It's not indeterminate. It's not haphazard. It is flexible, but they all serve to an outcome that is important to our clients. And then with the transparency and control, it's not, wishing, with a wish and a prayer, hoping that this thing does what I hope it does. You have fine tune. We actually use the term micro tune control over each agent in your process so that it can do exactly what you want it to do. So, is it getting information from a database? It gets it exactly the way that you want it. That's not a very complex task, but it still is not, can not be left up to chance if you want it to be. What happens when you get a null value returned, right? That data doesn't exist or got deleted. You have a express action for that, so it's not an issue. And then with, excuse me, transparency, you're able to see everything along the line. So if you're running, run this automation a million times, you're able to see each one of those occurrences and see exactly what it did from one agent to another and be able to highlight anything you want to improve, catch anything that you did not want to occur, and then overall just be able to see what's happening so you can trust it and trust that it's doing what you want to do for your customers and clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it seems like the transparency thing seems really key to me where a lot of these automation systems, AI agents, it's kind of like I talked with another team member about this, Melly, and she was telling me about like kind of the prompt engineering aspect of it
Mhm.
and how when you're really prompting these, you're testing what is the output of these prompts. And if we run all this data through this prompt, what is the output and really fine tuning that. And so it seems really seems like you guys are really on the mark in terms of like just fine tuning, doing the prompt engineering, the transparency side of things. And I'm curious what you guys have found in terms of like, do customers and clients like want to see each phase of that process? Do you find, or are they usually more hands off? Or I'm curious, like, when you guys are working with these businesses, like, what is the kind of like interaction when you guys are actually building these out as opposed to um, actually delivering it and like giving them a way to interface with these systems
Yeah.
that you're building for them.
I would say generically, people just want the job done, right? Like this is a pain point for them. It's a opportunity that they're unable to take advantage of, or a major cost center that they're hoping to make more efficient. Um, and so at the end of the day, people want to know, can it do what I need it to do? Can it generate this artifact that is critically important to our business? Can I get the information that I need to make the correct decisions that, support the mission of our enterprise? Like, that's what it comes down to. So that's the number one question, that everything comes back to that. However, every situation is different. There is, even companies in the same space are going to do things differently. That's what makes them unique. That's why they exist. And so being able, when you're, like you mentioned, in that, instruction layer, to really add what's special about this circumstance to our automations is key, right? It's not, one way of doing something. There's a lot of ways. There's different ways you want to do it in different circumstances. There is a style and a voice that you want to ensure that you have. And so for truly countless reasons, you're going to have almost infinite possibilities in, a very small set that, people can call it the prompt layer, or instruction set, or the composition of the automation. I think most of our customers are not wholly concerned about that. They're more concerned about the outcome, and that getting that dialed and tuned achieves the outcome that they're concerned about.
Yeah, kind of building on top of that, it seems to me that you guys are you're focusing on like scalability, and you guys are focusing on actually being able to handle volume.
hmm
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like what is required in actually building these systems that can handle scale and volume, as opposed to maybe a more simple automation system that once it hits 1,000 iterations it breaks or something like that,
hmm
right? Like what is the difference between those two and kind of your guys' approach to that?
Yeah, I think just in handling a large volume, that's just really quality engineering, right? There's not that much different about utilizing LLMs in the process to do some work than it was, 5 years ago to accomplish a deterministic task, right? You still need to follow the best practices. You need to make sure your system scales. You need to make sure that you're balancing the load correctly. You're efficiently gather, fetching data, you're efficiently storing data. All of those things really help with, moving you beyond a trivial amount. But the true barrier to scale in our business is not on our side. It seems like I'm blame shifting here, but it truly is on our customers and them identifying the real bottleneck of their business, right? If they have a process where they need to reconcile two different documents, make sure that they're in agreement before they pay an invoice, or make sure that they have a ticket before they do some task or change the system in some way, and doing that automated check, right? That could that could be the bottleneck, but most of the time it's gathering the documents. Okay, I've got 100 invoices to pay today because I'm a large enterprise. I got to go find 100 purchase orders, or maybe more, right? Maybe these invoices combine 10 purchase orders apiece. I got to go make sure I have all of those in the system. They're properly attached in our accounting software. What happens if they're not? And so, just doing a quick check that our system could easily do does do that. It can not be the bottleneck, can not really add a lot of value to the company, because their major time consuming activity is something besides the actual work, right? It's, if you got all the pieces there, it, takes 5 seconds to do for a human, but it's the hours of accumulating what you need to accomplish the task. And if that's still not changed, then that's, AI is not going to really benefit your org, in a substantial way. So a big part of our job is going end to end in the process and saying, can this truly help you, or do you have a bottleneck that needs to be changed, or a process that needs to be improved so that you can really get the benefits? And can we insert AI into that process? Ideally, right? And then we can, discover the other bottlenecks. So that is truly the biggest limiting factor in terms of scale for us. It's not on the technical, like, on the compute side or the generation side. It's on the organization side to be able to do things at the speed of AI, right? Which is, almost instant or relatively instant because it's just so much faster than humans. And so if you're doing knowledge work almost instantaneously, what second and third order effects does that create? And are you ready to handle those?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. This concept was brought up in past talks as well of tribal knowledge and just
Hmm.
this sense of like the automation itself is pretty straightforward to build, but is it solving the right problem? Is it
Hmm.
solving the problem that's actually going to be the unlock? And I think what I heard you say there, which I actually haven't thought about before, is the sense of like as soon as you build the automation, now that it does it almost instantaneously, it actually unlocks other further bottlenecks because now the time to complete the knowledge work is no longer the constraint, but it's actually what happens next or what inputs need to go into the system. And so,
Hmm.
have you guys found that do you guys build a lot of systems where you're like getting input data from like multiple different sources, or how are you guys
Hmm.
actually like building these systems out? Is it like someone uploads a document to somewhere and then it runs through your system, or is it like just like pulling and integrating with all of
Yeah,
the
so
previous
that
platforms?
that's a great question. So it can kind of come at its own pace, the data. So we'll say you have a product catalog that's quasi-static, right? Like you're, adding a few SKUs a day, removing a few a week, but it's not constantly changing or being overhauled in the course of, every hour. And so you can send us that data whenever you want, and we can just hold on to it, right? You can send the work flow, and it can have it ready to be utilized in a process, right? And so if you're using product data to generate, let's just call it ads, that can remain and it can be sent at a different time than the specific ad you're trying to reach, say a spring um, collection for um, Father's Day or something like that, right? Like, so you've got this, thing, um, that occurs. You've got this other thing that's occurring. Your product catalog is churning, and so you can do those at different times. And so for an automation that takes the customer base, the products, the time of year, the promotion, the season, you can send all of those different things at different times, and when you're ready or at a defined time, you can run that automation and it would generate what you're hoping to achieve. So there's no real constraint on what you can and cannot send us, and it doesn't have to, and it can totally be asynchronous.
Absolutely. So when you're working with these clients, are you building out like multiple different automations? Like this is
Mhm.
let's generate ads, let's categorize this information. Is it like a bunch of variant systems that all kind of like go towards their goal of achieving ROI?
Yeah. So yes and no. So some have a specific automation and automation to rule them all that has the, the logic and specific use cases, do this, not that in these circumstances. And some want a completely different automation for that rule, right? So it really comes down, it really mimics how the organization itself is structured. So if you've got a lot of divisions and those divisions are responsible for different things or similar things, they probably like to break it up along those lines. That's a common pattern that I've seen, where there's overlap, right? We're doing this across all divisions, right? That's probably going to be shared in one automation. So it really comes down to how the organization itself is wanting to manage and monitor these organizations and who's responsible, right? You have 10 different people responsible for each one. They probably kind of want their own automation so that they can watch it and make sure that it's achieving what they want it to for their particular use case. And it might be very, very similar to their counterpart in another division, but it's still that human nature of, I want transparency. I want control. I don't want to see my colleagues' information. I want to see my information. And so that's typically how it turns out into the real world.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm really curious about how are you guys thinking about like long-term growth of this platform given the rate at which AI is developing?
Mhm.
Mostly, are you guys like just connecting to like the different API end nodes for OpenAI and Claude and all that stuff. And then as those get better, you just connect with the newer and better end nodes. Or yeah, I'm just kind of curious on like a macro level how you guys are just thinking about kind of
Yeah,
the changing
that's a
marketplace
great
and stuff
question,
like that.
and we do discuss that, right? We are from day one, we've been platform agnostic, but some platforms, some language models do things better than others, right? There's not a model yet to rule them all. And so, and clients have different wishes and constraints. They want to have, it never leave our premises. And so they don't really care about the best absolute most performance, or they don't need a certain aspect of the latest model. They care about price, right? They're using it intermittently, so we don't want to run the model, right? Like it's private. um, and so they can't have it, go to a third party provider, but it's a very intermittent process, say like only once a month. Well, okay, how do we structure that? So we know that it's going to be highly variable in the use cases for our customers. And so the good news is our platform, the barrier is not what if our clients have a particular need or desire for the use of a particular model. That's not a limiting factor, right? Like we don't have every model in the world available in our platform just because it's unnecessary. But if someone wanted to say use Quinn for whatever reason, and that was a demand, using Quinn would be a trivial exercise in our platform, and it'd be available for them to select, and before they were even ready to roll it out to production.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, there's more models by the day that it
Yeah.
probably doesn't make sense to have dozens and dozens of models.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably be seeing people most interested, as good as they are right now. I mean, unless there's some major breakthrough that no one else, that one person in one frontier lab achieves that the others don't. I think we'll probably go to the most efficient or effective. People don't mind using oh 04 Mini, right? If we can get the same result with oh 04 Mini, the price is so much cheaper than the latest from the other model, then absolutely we can do that, and we have done that.
Have you guys found that the price, like when you're running on that type of volume, like is like a huge factor in the types of models that you're choosing?
Typically not, because the things we're doing are so expensive for the organization. It's such a marginal improvement to whatever that activity is. So let's say it's generating some high quality artifact for the business. That's costing them hundreds of man hours to produce. And so, it we're not, and so hundreds of man hours, even if you assume, a low wage is drastically compares to, or, it just outpaces the price of a language, operating a language model for a few minutes, right? Like, so yes, it it is, it can be not cheap, right? Like, it's not like a single subscription to Slack or something like that. It's not $5, but it's so much cheaper than having the human processes, or the old, paying for a developer to wire something up, that's costing them $200 an hour for 10 hours a week, almost indefinitely. That is very expensive, and this is far less expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it seems like as development work is getting easier and easier and these AI models are being able to actually program themselves, it almost seems like this scalability is becoming more and more important because now anyone can spin up some code
Hmm.
instead of Claude to do XYZ, but having actually like a model that's truly designed and engineered and scalable is going to be still difficult to produce.
Yeah, and I think one more thing on the cost side of things, right? We use the term micro tuning, and that's deliberately different than fine tuning. And where fine tuning can be prohibitively expensive, even to large enterprises, it can be time consuming, and it's also not deterministic on its outcome. So you can train it on your data and say, this is how I want the memos to be written at my company, and you feed it to, 1,000 memos from the past and all of the things. And it still, it could be better than, out of the box model XYZ, but it might not be, it still might not be good enough. And then you've, spent thousands of dollars and left with the decision, do we go with good enough? Or maybe it's not good at all. Or, yes, this is good, but wow, we just got bought and our brand name is changing. And so we've got this perfectly fine-tuned model that writes memos for Acme Corp. And, we're going to be, Great Place Unlimited. So how do you get that all that knowledge of Acme Corp out of it to never use that again, right? You retune, just put that in the prompt layer to stop using it. So there's issues, right? And so with the micro tuning, it's deliberate and it is more deterministic and it's immediate. So not only is it cheaper, it's faster time to value and it's transparent. Again, that word, but you're able to see the improvements in the model with every example you provide it, and then take it to the place you want it to go, and not stop at good enough. Go to perfectly dialed, go to production ready, and know you're production ready because you have that visibility into the system.
So when you guys are doing this micro tuning, like what layer is this happening on? Is this like in the data layer, the prompt layer, all of the layers? Help me understand
Yeah,
this.
so this is primarily happening on the prompt layer and in the instruction set, and then also on the vector space as well. So it is happening across multiple aspects of the LLM stack, but primarily it's refining the instructions that the human originally wrote for this model to complete to better meet this case that it didn't meet when it encountered it, right? You wanted it to say X, it said Y. You can now say, okay, in this circumstance, this is saying Y. And, it searches across that embedding space and says, is this similar to that case? Is it not? And so it's not just adding another rule to the prompt saying, in case of Y, do this, and that. It really is having some multifaceted approach to make sure that it's not only adding more slop to the instruction set, but adding a intelligence, really, adding a statistical way of knowing that when this happens, you're going to get the result that you're looking for.
Do you guys find that you guys are like breaking up prompts? If you like try to ask it too much and it can't handle it, are you guys like fine tuning by like actually saying, let's let this model do less and fine tune the specific components and then like combining them together at the end?
We do a little of both, in different scenarios, different methods are used. So if you had, we have a client now that's um, going back to the theme of it kind of models reality. Their current system has a multi-review system, right? A human generates this content that is reviewed. Actually, first, the human is prompted to generate the content by someone saying, I want these things created, and that human creates them, and that's passed off to an editor who edits them, and then it's passed off to a reviewer who, makes sure they comply with, all the guidelines, and then legal looks at them, and then, the executive or, the person over that content says, in a whole, is this, cohesive, right? Are we saying this here and saying this here? And that doesn't make sense. Why would we do that? And so we, in that case, have very pointed agents that are doing those things. We're having agents that are taking in the request, making sure that we understand the request, making sure the data is present. So it's going out there and saying, hey, I was told to do this. Do I have all the information that I need to do that? Right? That's separate than saying, get the information and create this thing. So then it's like, hey, I've got the information. Oh, by the way, I've got most of it. I was missing this one piece. I think you can still do that. You've done it before without this, but I do have it in other circumstances. So, you know, be aware of that. And so that gets added to the context for the actual creative agent, right? That's creating that, artifact and it goes into the editor, and then it goes into just like a style guideline editor, right? And so since that's what's happening in reality, we find that that is one easier for the organization to understand because that's how they're working today. They can say, let me hop into this stylistic guideline reviewer to see what it's doing, right? Like that's my job, or I was once in charge of 10 people that were reviewing this. I'm in charge of an output every Monday that is doing this. And am I agreeing with how this model found it? And then, making updates as needed. And so other times it's a single, instruction set that says, hey, this is what I want you to do. When this happens, go do it. And it can be even more complicated, but if it in that case, it's the one I'm thinking of is kind of it's one person, right? Their job was to monitor this community and report trends over time in what is happening in this, community and ecosystem. And so since that was all kind of done by one person, it has made its way into the digital world as um, one more significant prompt.
Yeah, I really like that approach of just like what are the current stakeholders in this business, current people in this business, and how do we kind of just map it to the agents to what's already happening. Thank you for the conversation today, Marcus. It's really, really insightful to be able to see these different aspects of what you're doing and what the team's doing. So I really appreciate you taking the time today.
You're welcome. It was great talking to you.